Welcome to the Confident Mental Wellness Podcast. Challenge what holds you back, where we love on and challenge business executives, entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, thought leaders, and coaches to take us deep, revealing how self-doubt, negative thinking, and even sheer fear were secrets they refuse to reveal to anyone. Secrets that once held them back. We'll hear how these leaders cast off the fear, excuses, and setbacks to move forward with purpose and passion. How they activated a mindset that set them up for success. Hi, I'm Stephanie King Mattingly, and welcome back to my podcast. It's called Challenge What Holds You Back. We help you identify how the memory of your past experiences may be causing you anxiety and stress today. So what happened? What happens? All that baggage that we're carrying around. Well, we often take it to work, but not only work, we take it into our businesses, into our homes, and into our relationships. So if we're going to focus on that, we examine those kinds of issues. And our theme for season 1 is workplace mental wellness. Our guest today is bringing us the lighter side. And I have to admit, I wondered, a lighter side to mental problems. It can't be, but it is. Our guest is Hersh Rephun. And Hersh brings that lighter side with laughter and comedy to help lighten things up when it comes to our mental health, and particularly as it relates to the kind of work we do. So Hersh, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Yeah, it is kind of for me to think about the lighter side to mental health, especially when you think mental issues can create depression and stress and anxiety and all sorts of unsettling kind of feelings. Then where does laughter fit in that?
Well, I definitely am approaching it more from a kind of humanistic point of view than a clinical or medical point of view. I'm not a medical practitioner and I'm not a therapist. I'm a branding and messaging expert, and I'm also a stand-up comedian. And it actually struck me at some point that when you look at those two things together, comedy being a way of processing reality and then adding humor, irony, a little bit of processing to it to help make the reality go down a little better. And messaging is also about how do brands communicate with their audience? How do they not overwhelm them? And how do they laugh at themselves? A lot of brands and professionals don't know how to laugh at ourselves because we take everything too seriously. So that kind of led me to what I call selling the truth, which is you're accepting that there's, let's say in the case of mental health, we're accepting that there are challenges. We're accepting that we're fatigued. We're accepting that we've gone through a lot of very difficult things and continue to on a daily basis that vex us and freak us out a little bit. But we have to take a step back and say, okay, well, how do I laugh at myself? How do I find the humor in it? And how do I digest what's hard to take about the world? And it really comes from doing it myself. I mean, I think that humor is what got me through the pandemic, being able to look at a really, really strange and uncertain situation and worry about my family's well-being and what's going to happen. And, making silly videos was my coping mechanism. I wasn't not treating the pandemic I was very careful. I did I followed all the protocols. I did everything that I could do to keep everybody safe. But I found ways to do the lighter side, as you say, going on a walk with my dog and just kind of imagining what he must be thinking, not seeing people on the street, and so I'm videotaping the dog, but I'm doing his voice into the camera, what's going on in his head, things like that, that are just, it's just helpful.
Sure. Hirsch, back up a little bit and tell me your story. It seems fascinating how you have married these two, mental health and humor and our work.
Well, I started out in uh, film school. I went to School of Visual Arts in New York, and I studied filmmaking and advertising, which they also had as a major. Um, and so right out of the gate, I was torn between two worlds. Am I going to become a filmmaker or a comedian or something of that ilk, or am I going to work in the advertising industry?
Mm,
And as it happened, I ended up working in the commercial production world, representing directors of TV commercials, as through a connection I got through school, and it turned into a career in PR for those people, for directors and composers and editors.
mhm,
And then on the side, I would do my stand-up comedy. I lived in New York for many years. I lived in LA for many years. And so I would just do all the comedy clubs, and I would go out and get my fix, as it were, that way. But it really did kind of gnaw at me. So when you talk about mental health, it really did stress me out and leave me depressed about the fact that I couldn't do the one or the other completely, because I wanted to have the income. I had a family, a growing family, and I didn't want to risk everything and try to go on the road as a stand-up comic. And that's stuff those are decisions I made. I made decisions to start a family. It's not anybody else's choice. It was mine. So I obviously wanted to, start a family and and be a parent and do all that. You can't do everything at the same time. And and that's one of the big lessons I learned is that you can do all the things you want if they're important enough to you. You just have to choose the right moments for each of the things that you want to do.
mhm. And so, what you do now with two podcasts you have, what you do
Yeah.
now is you're able to continue the kind of the PR branding arena, and you
Well,
marry that with your comedy.
yeah. So that's interesting in that what ultimately became clear to me was, and that's when I started this new company, Yes Brand, which is based on the improvisational comedy rule of yes and, which is that you're doing a scene with somebody, they put out an offer, you accept that offer and build on it. And that to me is what I do with my clients. They come to me with their personality, their business model, their message, and I put it in with my own view of the world and how I see things. And sometimes it is the lighter side. Sometimes it's just a very human kind of, comedy is very much about empathy. And it may seem harsh sometimes, like we're making fun of stuff or we're, busting chops, but really there's an empathy there that comedians feel. Sometimes it's neurosis, sometimes it's, insecurities, but they're feeling things very deeply. And quite often when they're outraged, it's because they're feeling the pain of people in the world very deeply as well, the people that they know personally or just, people that they see suffering. And so all of that sensibility gets kind of um, spun into the work that I do with brands. And we
Okay.
live in an age where brands are really keyed into human nature, perception, uh, humanity, sustainability, but they're not going to get away with it if they try to fake it. They're going to have to be real on some level.
Mm,
And I think that's where this all came from professionally was, yeah, I don't need to necessarily do stand-up comedy to be happy. I need to work within comedy. I need to get real, and I need to help people identify their voices and be creative. I think what I was battling against all those years was that the job wasn't really creative. I had two jobs. I had the creative job and the not creative job. And that was my mistake.
Now they're together, and does that make you
Yeah.
feel more fulfilled?
Yeah. Yeah, very much
Has it
so.
helped your mental health?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. But I will say on the subject of mental health that I think it's been a process of a couple of years now of doing a lot of different things. Meditation, introspection, mindfulness, quantum quantum consciousness,
Mm,
acceleration, things like just trying a lot of different things that because I think the pandemic threw us off all off kilter. So it was like an opportunity to do some stuff that we hadn't done. Okay, well, this deal is taking longer than it would to put together, or this thing isn't working out, or I can't leave my house. What am I going to do? You
sure.
know, can I work on myself a little bit and see if that affects some kind of change?
Has it? You've worked on yourself? Sounds like quite a bit.
Well, there's a lot to fix. There's a lot to work on. No,
That's true.
for all of us. Yeah, no,
Yeah, for all of
it's
us, yeah.
it's helped in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
I think to your point, when you ask about happiness, are you happier? That's kind of the most important part, right? You could, because I did look at my business model. I felt that it was very random in a lot of ways. I would take work as it came in and I think part of it is that there was something missing from that model, which
Sure.
was the intense creativity. And I think that limits you. If you don't incorporate your real superpower into what you do,
Yes.
you're selling yourself short. And if you sell yourself short, you're not going to have the business growth that you would like to have.
Mhm.
And so I think, that changed a lot as I threw these things out there.
Sure. I'm curious about your thoughts about the workplace.
Mhm.
You've worked for many years, of course. Um, what do you think is happening with employees when they go to work? I have mentioned that we take our baggage with us. I mean, we do because it travels inside us and our heads and our memories, ready to just pounce on us. Those old secrets and fears and problems, and they hold us back.
Yeah.
They hold us back. Maybe we don't step out for that promotion.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not transparent with our coworker and we're on a team and the project fails um, because we've got stuff we're hiding in there. So, how can we take a different approach to work in managing not only that stuff we're hiding and the stress we feel if we think we're going to be exposed?
Yeah.
Can we bring humor into that? What's the best way to cope at work?
Yeah. I think that you touched on something really significant, which is that it affects your performance when you keep these things down, when you keep these things in. At the same time, we're now in a social space where we're we're wanting to, in many cases, and also being guided to be more sensitive, tolerant, understanding.
Mhm.
And anytime you kind of layer that on top of the workplace, um, it feels a little forced to some people. They're like, "Oh, I'm not allowed to say this. I can't, speak openly. I can't have a contrary opinion if it's contrary to, So you have this backlash of against political correctness, where the goal of political correctness, if we were to really break it down, should be to be civil and to be understanding and open and welcoming, and then everybody should embrace everybody else. But because that doesn't, that doesn't necessarily happen organically, I think that a sense of humor
Mm.
diffuses that tension. I think back to an incident in my upbringing, and I think of myself as having generally very happy and healthy upbringing, but there was some kind of big fight. I have 2 older sisters,
Mhm.
and, they were teenagers at the time, so that already tells you a lot. Having had
Mhm.
teenagers and having a teenager myself, I know that that's a tough time, that's a challenging time. So, my sisters were teenagers, there was some kind of big fight. My parents were very angry at my oldest sister, and there was some kind of clash, and it was very explosive, and somehow my other sister, who's the middle child, was like kind of out of the room when this was going on, but I was too young to do anything about it. I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut, which I wasn't always. But this, but I really have to say, like, I don't remember the tension in my house being as thick as that moment was. My oldest sister, verge of tears, are already crying. My mother and father, infuriated and just intransigent at that moment. And then my other sister walked into the room and she said, "Excuse me." And everybody turned around and she said, "What does this have to do with me?" And everybody cracked up laughing.
Yeah.
And it is the kind of thing that one might expect that sister of mine to say, but in that moment, I was frozen with terror, like, just like, how you have that feeling that you just don't wanna even look up, and that
Mhm.
her timing was impeccable, and
It
and
sounded
and it
hilarious.
just and it made my parents both laugh, and that cut the tension, and then everybody was able to say, "Okay, what is really the problem here?" And it's that release. And that's the same thing you have in a comedy club, when except you know that it's coming, or you hope that it's coming, is that there's tension, everybody's waiting, waiting,
Mhm.
waiting, boom, there's the punchline, everybody releases and laughs. So I think that, satire and comedy in the workplace, having a sense of humor, is just super important. But, you know, it's it's um it's subjective, right? So the only rule that I can offer or apply is, well, what matters more than anything is intent. So if someone goes in and says, "Okay, we're going to use humor to cool off the workplace, and I'm going to
Mhm.
make fun of you, you, and you," that doesn't
Right.
that doesn't help. You
No.
know,
That
the
was I
game,
was gonna ask you that next.
right? That's not what it's about. It's not about making fun of other people. It's about, okay, like, we're gonna all fill out cards, and we're gonna go around the room, and everybody's gonna write down their most embarrassing moment outside of the office, their most embarrassing moment
Mhm.
in life, and they're gonna put it in. The best one, will win, will get free lunch the rest of the week or whatever, right? Um, and so it's what it does is it puts everybody on the same level.
It
And I think that's true. I think comedy is a very good equalizer. It puts people at 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 par with one another.
I'm just thinking about the workplace, and if you're the person who's at work and you're feeling that stress, I mean, not necessarily from the work that you have to do, but just from what's going on in your head.
Right,
Worried
sure.
about the argument you just had,
Yeah.
before you got there. So, do you think that maybe the person who is distressed can use humor themselves, or that we should consider doing it for ourselves and just laugh about the fact that we're kind of edgy today,
Yeah.
instead of being edgy and not wanting to be bothered or expecting people to read your mind and leave you alone, you just throw a joke out about who you are and where you are right now.
Yeah. And no one needs to hear that either. You're right. That's a very different kind of coping. And I have to be honest. I mean, I have talked to myself out loud
Mhm.
for as long as I can remember, my whole life. Sometimes my wife will hear me do it, and I'm not even conscious that I'm doing it. And, she called my attention to it once, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm sure I was talking to myself. Like, I just do." But I really do that. Or, like this evening, my wife and our younger daughters are away for a couple of days, so it's me and the dog in the house. And I just went into the other room and I'll talk to the dog. I mean, we all talk to the dog, but I mean, like I'll talk to the dog in a like person to person way. And you can do
Okay.
that too with a pet. You know, you could talk to a pet and in a way that's funny. The pet certainly isn't going to be offended. They may walk out of the room in disinterest, but they're not going to be upset. You know, they won't be
No.
mad at you. And again, the joke isn't on them, right? Like I said to my dog's most of the day he's been sitting on a pillow because I'm the only one who's here to take him out. I took him out a couple times, but
Mhm.
I walk in and he's looking at me with his head on the pillow, and I go, "I know it's been a rough day. It's a rough day for you. Had to sit on your butt the whole day,
All day.
and you got to run around a couple of times, and that was it. And you got a rough life, kid. I don't know what to tell you. You know?
Well, Hersh, I'm curious about something else. So you do something called message therapy.
Yeah,
And I mean, on your podcast, you take a case and do therapy right there with your client. Is that
yeah.
what I heard?
Yes. Yeah, well, I it came from life, you know, I in real life, I could be anywhere with my clients. I could be at a ball game or I could be, you know, in an office. It wouldn't matter. But they're talking to me about what they're experiencing and I'm giving them feedback. And yeah, sure, there are things where you say, "Let me think about that." But other times it's the interplay, the art of conversation that leads to a solution. And it's like anything, like talking through anything. The only difference is that I usually, the way my mind works, talk through it with humor, unless it's a very, very serious conversation, which could happen as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if some that's why I say humor and humanity are my specialties, because if someone came to me with a really serious and delicate problem, I wouldn't make a joke out of it. But if they were super depressed about it, you know,
Mhm.
that then I might make a joke to lift their spirits, and it might even be a little bit dark joke or a little bit like I do think that part of it is being willing to push it a little bit
Mhm.
for a good result. Again, intent, right?
Right. Right. So you're talking about companies developing their brand messages and adding humor to that message, right? And to what
Yeah.
they're projecting.
Well,
Uh, mhm.
sometimes humor, and sometimes it's just about their voice, and it's defining their voice. But
That's truthful.
yeah, truthful. Yeah.
Right, right. I'm just wondering if, mm, let's say, a company who comes to you and they want to add humor or a lighter side to how they're projecting themselves. Does that have to, or does it match how the actual environment is within the company where employees can experience that likeness, that understanding that I work for a company that cares for my mental wellness and they make things smooth and easy? Does it relate? I mean, they're working for the brand message outside, external,
Yeah.
but does it even carry over so the employees experience that likeness?
It's Stephanie, it's very important that the company's message is transmitted completely the same, whether it's to the public or to their employees. A lot of companies, especially big companies, have talent retention problems because the image that gets put out there, let's say it's a consumer brand, you know, the image that gets put out there is so powerful and wonderful and happy and everything. And the way they communicate with the employees may not be the same. It may not be terrible, but the employees want that same magic. You're like, you know, it's like, you know, why don't we get that same feeling that the consumer gets? And so they have to adjust
And
accordingly.
do they adjust? Some
Well, it depends on the client. If they come to me, they're probably prepared to. Because the first thing I would say if that were the problem is, you know, I understand that we don't want to do the same. You're not going to give commercials and ad copy to your employees in correspondence. I understand that.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm.
my specialty is I would say, okay, I get your voice. I understand your voice. I will write some sample correspondence for you that takes your voice and brings it down and makes it very accessible, but still feels like it's coming from where the heart of that brand comes from. And and then hopefully sometimes I create a voice, brand voice guide for them where they can give it to their in-house writers, whoever's doing their correspondence. They can give it to their publicist. They can give it to their managers, and they can learn to adapt and write in that voice and correspond in that voice.
That would
Similar to the way you'd use brand colors, like
Mhm.
you'd say, "Every we use orange, we use this particular index
Yeah.
and all that stuff." So it's like, okay, so here are some of the words we use, but it's not just about being careful the way it is often with PR. It's about being accessible to your
Yes.
own internal team.
Yes. And employees and just
Yeah,
everyone, of course, want to know that we have a feel for the heart of our leaders in
that's
the
right.
company.
Yeah,
Right? And I can also imagine that stress can build in an employee if what they see that the outside customers are seeing and hearing and getting, but on the inside, employee knows that's not how.
yeah,
And so now you're working, toward the company goals and missions, and yet you don't feel that your boss or your company leaders are being authentic. It's like
yeah,
a fake thing. And if
yeah,
the work you're doing is doesn't mean what it says it means, um, that seems like it would create another level of stress.
yeah, yeah. And how damaging must that be? Because it's similar to dishonoring a member of your family.
Mm,
When if
mhm,
you're putting stuff out to the customers and you're kind of being a little bit too manipulative or whatever it is, that's a professional kind of misdeed or misstep. But if you're mistreating people who are the custodians of your brand, of your image, and you're
mhm.
on the one hand trusting them with the brand to do their job for the brand and expecting that, and then on the other hand you're kind of not treating them as well as you do a customer. That's a problem.
So is that the kind of thing you um, will or already do bring up to the CEOs that you work with when you're working on their branding to look internally and look
Yeah,
at the experience that employees are having?
yeah. When that's the issue, I prefer, if I can, for a while I had my own agency, and that would involve a lot of people and a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that I would have to manage or that didn't have to do with me. These big campaigns with all kinds of pieces. And what one of the things that I realized over the last few years was, I enjoy the interaction with the founders, the CEOs, the people who are really responsible for the heart of the company or are the heart that started the company. And so I prefer to work one on one with those people, and then from there figure out, well, who else do I have to talk to in the company and all that. So
Mhm.
rather than have it get further and further removed, I like to go right to the source. And I will have very frank. I have always had a comfort level around decision makers, and I think it's because of the comedy again. Like when you're doing stand up, you don't care who's in the audience. It could be the president or it could be, the person who's a waiter at the club. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets treated with a little bit of irreverence,
Mhm.
but, you're there to serve them. They're paying you. You're working for them. So I have that combination of knowing that I'm working for someone who's in a very important and significant position, but also not being cowed by them or and being able to bust their chops a little bit and have a little fun with them. That's very important.
Mhm. So, to maintain a sense of mental wellness at work, what advice would you have for CEOs and for employees?
Okay, well, for one thing, and I do understand that uh, there are protocols in work and that are there to protect us. Boundaries. It's like, you have that thing where a CEO would say, well, if I say my door's always open, then people be coming in here all day long. And it's and then it's just a chaotic experience. And so I would say right off the bat, it's, it's a good idea to structure times and events that allow people to be heard and if you do it in the context of comedy, like a comedy night, or that's a great thing, by the way, within any industry. If you're all accountants and you do a comedy night at a comedy club and you kind of reserve that night for your peers and your coworkers, and it's like the karaoke experience, but people get a chance to talk about stuff, and no one, and if the intent is there, and it because otherwise you say, okay, this is our time to talk to the CEO, and everybody's like, oh, I can't bring this up, or I can. So what the CEO can do is get up there and make a joke at their own expense and lighten the mood a little bit, and be human and be a little vulnerable. There's a big chasm between the CEO and the regular employee that's only been there, for 3 months, let's say, the new lowest rung employee. There's going to be a big gap. So the CEO doesn't have to be nervous about giving up their power, you know? They can hold on to their power, and what if anything, if she or he have really uh uh strong confidence in themselves and have a really good self-image, that's bodes much better for their relationship with their team and their employees, because it means that most likely they can see humor in situations, and they can also be sympathetic in situations, and defaulting to humanity is never a mistake, I think.
Defaulting to humanity.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in other words, by saying, I'm going to go with my sympathy or empathy in a certain situation because I'm torn between being tough and being human in this situation.
Yeah.
And I'm going to default to the human kindness in this instance. Not that every time giving in, or we're talking about very high level, discourse. People should be very skilled in interpersonal communications and decision making, right? All that stuff is kind of
Okay.
makes sense. Surround
Mhm.
yourself with smart people. Surround
Right,
yourself
right.
with people who are better than you at the jobs that they do. All of those decisions that they presumably make. But I think that ability to be strong enough in your own persona that you are willing to laugh at yourself, it will allow other people to feel elevated and then laugh at themselves, and experience some of that.
Sure. I think that's wonderful. Just being able to laugh at yourself. If we can, what is it? Is it a matter of letting our egos down?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that?
it is. It also is, what are the stakes? You know, if
Hmm.
you if like, I'm generally a punctual person. One of my best friends is completely not concerned with punctuality. So, he doesn't he's when we do business occasionally together, he's gotten better, but we would always be late. He would always be late to a meeting. If I was with him, I would be late too, or I would go on ahead and I would be the person who was there on time. But really, what's the difference? What is really the cost? Overall, are you respecting people's time? Yes. Are you known for being late? If that's the worst thing about you, then fine. It's like, and actually, if you use that as an example, over years and years, people would always make jokes about that stuff, that this guy was late. Oh, I guess this guy's not going to be here for another 10 minutes, and you would make a joke about like anybody's quirks, and that allows people to relax. if you're going to meet somebody and they're so serious that they can't laugh about, that they're going to take it that personally that you're 2 minutes late, they might be a little tight. So, you know,
And I can
loosen
imagine,
up,
yeah, in the
loosen up.
office, if you're too tight, I can imagine in the office, if you're just too tight, can't relax, everything's serious, and we're talking perfection here, um, you might find yourself isolated at your
Yeah.
desk by yourself. But
Yeah.
have a laugh, and here comes everyone.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that. And on that note, I'll bring our chat to a close. Hirsch, it's really been great. I mean, mental health is serious business. It's very
Oh,
serious,
yeah.
but there is a lighter side. We can have um, be humorous. We can bring in the humor, the levity, a lightness to things. And if we can do that when we're the person who's suffering in the moment, if we can do that, we can make it comfortable for others around us. And we don't have to be separate from the stigma or be
Right.
isolated. We can show that we're human and then it's okay. And I can imagine that would lighten the atmosphere in the office. We can take that on. So, first, tell us, how can we find your podcasts? How can we keep track of what's going on with you?
Yeah. So, Truth Tastes Funny is the first podcast, truthtastesfunny.com. And for Yes Brand, it's yesbrandmethod.com. And then for me, if you go to infone, inphone.co/Hersh, Hersh, all of my websites, appointment, uh, calendar stuff, everything that you might want from a contact card, a business card, or whatever is there as well, so people can reach out to me.
Great, great. Thank you so much for being here, for challenge what holds you back. And I think that we've done a pretty good job of challenging people to find the lighter side. Thanks,
Yeah, I'm
Serge.
glad. I'm
Appreciate you.
glad. And I appreciate the opportunity, Stephanie. Thanks so much. Congrats on this show. It's wonderful.
Because everyone's journey to confident mental wellness includes challenges, you're going to find a lot of value in our newest book, The Secret You Hide Holds You Back, How Letting Go Sweetens Life and Makes You Free. It's coming soon. If you know of a leader who would be perfect for this podcast, they've cast off the fear, excuses, and setbacks to activate a mindset that sets them up for success, please send them my way.